Open world VR, well, it's always been more of a promise than a reality, right? If you've spent any time in a headset, you already know the drill. Most games give you this, gym-sized sandbox to play in. It's a neat illusion of freedom, but it's tightly boxed in by loading screens and hardware limits. But there's an ambitious new release called Compass, and it wants to give you the entire sky. So, welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to unpack exactly how Canadian studio Trebuchet is pushing standalone virtual reality literally to its breaking point, taking those dense hardware constraints and turning them into a breathtaking aerial adventure. Think about how many times you've had to ride a super slow virtual elevator or, crawl through some narrow air vent just to let a new room load. For years, true open-world exploration on headsets without being tethered to a massive PC has just been incredibly tough to pull off. When you don't have a beefy graphics card doing the heavy lifting, doing things like rendering vast draw distances, managing dynamic levels of detail, and keeping the frame rate high all at once, well, it becomes a massive bottleneck. But Compass? They're aiming to shatter those expectations. They're promising this colossal, shifting environment made of towering clouds, floating ruins, and wild, unpredictable weather systems. And the kicker? It all runs natively right there on your headset, with zero immersion-breaking tricks required.
And honestly, the vibe they're going for here is absolutely striking. The developers over at Trebuchet describe the game as a Ghibli-esque adventure mixed with solar punk aesthetics. Picture this, a sweeping, high-altitude world bathed in golden hour light and cool blue clouds. It's already drawing heavy comparisons to beloved games like Wind Waker and Outer Wilds. If you know Trebuchet, you might remember they previously worked on a highly tactile exploration game called Winds and Leaves. Well, they're bringing that same beautiful, peaceful energy right into Compass. It's not really about high-octane dogfights, it's all about atmospheric exploration. Just taking in the view. At least until a massive storm rolls in or you suddenly cross paths with a legendary creature they call the Sky Beast. To pull off this massive vision, Trebuchet's 42-person veteran team teamed up with a VR publisher Creature. So mark your calendars. Compass officially launches on May 28th across the major platforms. That includes Meta Quest and Steam VR, with a PlayStation VR 2 release coming a bit later. And get this. It's priced at just $12.99. They are very deliberately positioning this as a high-fidelity, single-purchase premium experience, which is honestly super refreshing in a market that's lately been completely flooded with free-to-play social apps and endless microtransactions. Okay, let's talk about the core gameplay loop, because this is where things get really fun. You play as a scout. You fly ahead of a wandering airborne caravan right along a high-altitude trade lane called the Sky Path. Your primary mission was pretty straightforward. Help deliver a mysterious egg to the Great Incubator. Simple enough, right? Well, actually, after a catastrophic run-in with that Sky Beast we mentioned, your crew gets completely scattered. So now it's up to you to pilot your speeder, chart safe routes, deploy relays, and physically step out of your ship to grapple your way through ancient ruins. You'll be searching for your lost crewmates, like Captain Nime and Chladni the Navigator. But here's the absolute crucial part of the loop. You have to keep returning to the caravan's traveling garage to heavily upgrade your propulsion and hull plating. Seriously, this upgrade progression is absolutely vital. If you try flying a flimsy starter ship into one of those wild atmospheric storms, yeah, it's going to get torn to shreds. Now, as amazing as that gameplay loop sounds, rendering an entire sky with dynamic weather on a mobile Snapdragon chip is, well, it's just an immense engineering hurdle. In VR, performance isn't just about things looking pretty. It's quite literally a matter of physical comfort. If an open-world game drops frames or stutters while you're flying at breakneck speeds, you are going to feel immediate and severe simulator sickness. No thanks. So maintaining a buttery smooth 90 frames per second while simultaneously calculating real-time physics and rendering massive volumetric cloud environments, yeah, that pushes modern standalone headsets right to their absolute breaking point. To solve this massive headache, the developers actually had to create two entirely different optimization strategies, all depending on which headset you happen to be wearing. See, even though the Meta Quest 3 and the Quest 3S share the exact same Snapdragon XR2 Gen 2 processor, their lenses are vastly different. For the premium Quest 3, Trebuchet uses a high-clarity rendering pipeline that really takes advantage of those super clear pancake lenses. This gives you incredibly sharp horizons and beautifully smooth volumetric gradients on distant clouds. But for the budget-friendly Quest 3S, which uses those older Fresnel lenses that kind of inherently have softer edges, well, the team had to pull a very specific rendering trick out of their sleeves. And that trick is called fixed foveated rendering. Sounds incredibly technical, but it's basically this. By focusing the highest resolution exactly in the dead center of the display, which is where your eyes naturally rest anyway, and then drastically lowering the resolution and shading detail out on your peripheral vision,
the developers save a massive amount of processing power. It's so clever, this technique perfectly masks the visual shortcomings of the Quest 3's older lenses, all while making absolutely sure the game never drops below that critical 90 frames per second mark. Because again, we need that comfortable, nausea-free flight. To truly appreciate the level of optimization happening here, we really need to talk about the massive processing gap between PC VR and standalone hardware. I mean, on a PC, a game like Compass would lean on beefy Intel processors and dedicated graphics cards to push all those high-resolution textures and complex wind particle systems. Shrinking that entire massive experience down so it can run on the Quest's mobile architecture, specifically the Horizon OS and that little Adreno 740 GPU, really highlights the incredible engineering involved. It is a masterclass in getting a mobile chip to punch vastly above its weight class. They're delivering an open-world feel that, honestly, usually demands a heavy, expensive PC tower humming away on your desk. But hardware optimization is really only half the battle. The other half is player comfort. Because think about it, when you're banking and diving through the sky at top speed, why don't you get totally sick? Well, they solved the nausea issue using something called the cockpit effect. Instead of just mapping your movement to a tiny analog stick, which is notoriously awful for causing motion sickness, Compass actually forces you to physically reach out with your controllers and grab the virtual throttle and flight sticks. By doing this inside a stationary, fully rendered cockpit, your brain gets a grounded visual anchor for your peripheral vision. It completely neutralizes that weird inner ear discomfort during high-speed aerial maneuvers, so you just get to enjoy the incredible sense of scale and freedom without reaching for a bucket. And the cool part is that physicalized gameplay doesn't just stop when you finally land. When you leave the cockpit to explore these floating carrot-topped islands on foot, there is absolutely no jarring teleportation mechanic to rip you out of the experience. Nope, instead, you use this highly physicalized dual grapple system. It relies entirely on a realistic pendulum simulation. So your momentum is determined by the length of your cable, your entry velocity, and the exact split second you decide to let go. Let me tell you, it makes climbing ancient ruins and solving puzzles feel so visceral. You literally have to swing your arms and time your releases perfectly to clear massive gaps and restore harmony to the skies. It's basically virtual parkour.
Now, looking at all this, you might be wondering, why would a studio pour so much time and so many resources into building such a complex, premium game today, especially when free-to-play titles completely dominate the VR market right now? Well, the answer is in the community data. Over a quarter, 27% actually, of Quest 3 users are veterans upgrading from older headsets like the Quest 2. That is a massive, highly dedicated demographic. And they aren't looking for just another basic social app, right? They are hungry for exactly this kind of high-fidelity, physics-driven showcase that actually justifies their shiny, expensive new hardware upgrade. Trebuchet and Creature are betting big that quality and depth will totally win this audience over.
As Compass proves that we can finally actually trade that gym-sized sandbox for the entire open sky, it really leaves us looking toward the future of the medium. The way they're blending these brilliant rendering tricks with intensely physicalized locomotion, it's opening doors we previously thought required a heavy PC tower to unlock. Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. I want to pass the question over to you. What do you think is the biggest technical barrier to truly open-world VR on standalone hardware? And do you think the Quest 3 can eventually get there entirely without a PC?